If you know me, you know I love my dogs, Butters and Brownie. When I saw a woman recently getting backlash for lavishing her adorable pit bull with attention, everything from coconut oil moisturizing to gourmet meals, it was ugly to see. A bunch of the backlash was from men somehow convinced that a black woman loving her dog can't get a relationship or something more sinister. Also, I've always hated growing up with the stereotype that white people love their dogs more than black people, and Michael Vick's infamous dog fighting conviction plus all the black people who supported him did nothing good for that stereotype. Just like with a bunch of topics on my channel, I love to discuss little known or under-discussed history from a black perspective. So in this video, we'll explore black Americans and pets in a few ways, but particularly dogs. According to the Smithsonian, Americans own some 78 million dogs, 85 million cats, 14 million birds, 12 million small mammals, and 9 million reptiles. It was shocking to me that dogs come in second to cats, and we Americans spend approximately $60 billion on our pets each year. White people have the highest rate of pet ownership at 64.7%, while black households have the lowest rate at 34 to 36.9%. Unsurprisingly, this is due to important facets of black history. So let's get into it. Well, first, can I confess something about my doggies? Hold on, let's get out of the studio. Let's go into the living room. If you have dogs, you know that sometimes they smell like outside, and they don't excuse themselves when they need to fart. Like, it catches me off guard when I'm chilling, and this one, Butters, come here, Butters. This one just lets loose. He'll just let it loose and just keep going like nothing happened. It's important to me to keep my spaces fresh smelling. You guys know I love Scentbird, and they have a sister company named Drift that creates air products for your car and home. These chic and amazing smelling little clips can be placed in your car, and they're super powerful, but I found the most use for them in my home, especially in this area, in this little cartoned off game room area where my dogs like to hang out. I've found it's very useful over here. Drift products are made with sustainable materials and natural essential and fragrance oils, meaning that while powerful, they don't seem to irritate my baby's noses at all. Plus, it doesn't give me a headache, and it covers up their doggy smells. You can get wood or metal for $9 each, or stone for $14, and look at how it just snaps right on. Just snaps right on there, it's magnetic. These are long lasting too. By the time it's time to switch it out in 30 days, Drift will send you a monthly refill with a new limited edition scent that matches the season. The one Drift sent me this month is Mountain Green Sugared Citrus, and it smells so fresh. Fresh is the main word, but it also smells sweet. So it smells like something I want to eat outside, if that makes sense. If you want to elevate your scents in your car or home, you can use my coupon code INTELLECTUAL for 55% off your first month with Drift. The link is in my description box below. Now let's get into the history. Nana's mother, Arevia Peak, was alive and living in Rutherfordton, North Carolina in the first half of the century. She'd often bring groceries to rural homes and socialize with people. When she visited the wrong home, the white inhabitants stood by as their dog attacked her and chased her back to her car, making her permanently wary of dogs. And this was circa 1940s, but a long-running tradition in the South. The dogs cubano, or Cuban bull mastiff / bloodhound, were introduced in Cuba to capture enslaved people who ran away, and they would later be used in the States. Detailed Tyler D. Perry and Charlton W. Yingling. One traveler observed that Cuban trainers forced black men to abuse the dogs daily by whipping them while they were chained to the ground and simultaneously inciting the dogs to bite the men in reprisal. When the dogs had acquired a perfect hatred of their tormentor, the black trainer ran to the woods and dared the dogs to chase him. So yes, dogs were often trained to be racist based on their owners' behaviors, and this is a contemporary problem too.
Yo, that sounded smooth, y'all. I just have a oh God, I'm so sorry I keep doing that. Oh God, please
Please forgive me. I get that from my father. He's from a different generation.
By the late 18th century, the breeding and selling of Cuban bloodhounds took off. These utilitarian pets were used by British and French colonists on their enslaved populations. Hundreds of these animals were given to the French during the Haitian Revolution in 1803, recalled contemporary historian Antoine Matral. White women colonists welcomed the disembarking dogs with laughter, flowers, and kisses, despite their awareness of the gruesome executions they would soon perpetuate. More of these animals, which were noted for enduring beatings so severe in training that they would normally kill any other species of dog, they were used in the Maroon Wars of the 18th century by British colonists on the Jamaican Maroons. And between 1835 and 1842, the U.S. government bought 3 dogo cubanos for $151.75 each and bred them for their ongoing war with Florida Seminoles, continuing their practice of using attack dogs on indigenous populations, which they had been doing since they first arrived to the continent. The Cuban bloodhounds were less effective in the swampy Florida region, which Seminoles used to their advantage. And speaking of, Wade in the Water is believed to be an instructional song for escaped enslaved people to wash away their scent in rivers and streams when being chased by the bloodhounds. Some quick-thinking enslaved people rubbed hot peppers on their heels to upset dog noses or rubbed onions on their bodies to mask their scents. As early as the 1790s, there had been editorials in northern newspapers denouncing the use of attack dogs on the enslaved, while slavery-loving newspapers contained ads bragging about their bloodhounds being the finest dogs for catching Negroes, which became more numerous after the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. If you want your Negroes caught, send for Hamlin and Farmer, advertised in 1860 Kennel promoting its well-trained pack of Negro dogs at reasonable rates. Those men, J.W. Hamlet and Jacob D. Farmer, went from penniless Cheez-Its to wealthy businessmen because of their importation of bloodhounds from the Caribbean. The 1861 painting The Hunted Slaves by Richard Ansdell depicted hounds chasing down enslaved people in North Carolina, and numerous black writers from Frederick Douglass to Charles Ball mentioned dogs. The continued use of violent dogs by enslavers and slave catchers added to the weight of abolitionists' arguments that slavery was not a kind or benign institution. At the same time, black enslaved people were often forbidden to own dogs as pets or hunting aids. While the enslaved people that George Washington often were touted as having relatively abundant freedom because they had evenings, Sundays, and holidays off, they were still not allowed autonomy. Wrote George Washington in 1792, "It is not for any good purpose Negroes raise or keep dogs, but to aid them in their night robberies," before guiding his estate manager that the punishment for any enslaved breaking the rule would be severe and the dog hanged. Various counties and states would enact laws that restricted free black people and the enslaved from owning dogs, from Maryland outright banning black dog ownership by the enslaved to South Carolina taxing enslavers for every dog their enslaved population had. Thomas Jefferson ordered that every dog on his plantation owned by the enslaved be killed in 1808 because he thought they would attack his sheep. So for most of the enslaved and for free black people terrorized by racist dog owners, pet ownership was not guaranteed or protected. Secondly, dogs often didn't symbolize safety or companionship, but another reminder of the state of their dehumanization. This is especially true for those who ran away. Wrote Perry and Yingling, "The hounds pursued them, extending white power into mountains, swamps, and forests with their acute extra-human abilities to scent, hear, outrun, signal, attack, and sometimes execute black bodies." They continued, "The common refrain among slaves of being treated worse than a dog was no hyperbole, as many blacks were made subservient by a lesser species that was well maintained by the white power it fortified." Explained an enslaved man named James Williams who escaped from Alabama, "It is common to meet with dogs which will take no notice of whites, though entire strangers, but will suffer no blacks beside the house servants to enter the yard." So when slavery ended, dogs would remain an uncomfortable symbol for black Americans. During the era of exploitative sharecropping, some landowners used bloodhounds to hunt down workers who left before paying their trumped-up debts. But what about black people and pet ownership? Throughout history, animals were primarily used as tools for food, for protection, for hauling, etc., not seen as strictly companions. In pre-colonial Africa, various groups had village dogs unique to their region, from East African hunting dogs in Kenya to the Africanus dogs of southern Africa, which evolved over 7,000 years from the dogs depicted in ancient Egyptian art. In the West, it wasn't until the mid-19th century that more people apart from the upper classes had pets strictly for companionship, and pet ownership also increased due to the Industrial Revolution, creating more members of the middle class in urban areas. This also meant a corresponding rise in vet medicine and animal welfare, like the creation of the ASPCA in 1866. And there are a lot of photos from the late 19th and 20th century showing black people of all classes with their pets, like this cute pic of a grandfather and his granddaughter in their hound mix in 1910 Louisiana. The first black person with a degree in veterinary science was the Trinidadian-born Augustus Nathaniel Lushington, who graduated from University of Pennsylvania in 1897. Like many vets at the time with limited pet populations, he mostly treated farm animals. Unfortunately, the white farmers he provided services for often refused to pay him. Between 1900 and 1945, approximately 70 black veterinarians were trained at Kansas State, UPenn, and other PWIs before the creation of a veterinary college at Tuskegee Institute that today graduates over 50% of black vets. Dr. Elfreda Johnson Webb and Dr. Jane Hinton were the first black women to become vets in 1949, the same year that my grandmother was born. And this is important because I don't know if y'all realize, prior to vets taking care of people's pets, that means when your pet was old and sick, infirm, disabled, like you needed somebody to do that for you, or you were gonna have to do it yourself, or you were gonna watch your pet suffer. So, you know, we needed black veterinarians. Shout out to the black vets. By the 1920s and 30s, as cars replaced horses, veterinarians turned their practices towards small animals, and the pet industry rose into even greater prominence by the 30s and 40s. Kitty litter was invented in 1947, making cats more appealing. Like, I cannot believe there was no kitty litter before that. I would not have a cat without kitty litter. A prolific black cat owner was a former nightclub dancer named Princess Starletta DePar, who was profiled in Ebony magazine in 1965 because she shared her living quarters with 112 cats. She had become paralyzed after a nightclub accident in 1951, and she spent her time breeding cats to raise money for other disabled people. She founded the Hearts and Hands Foundation for the Handicapped, and through that foundation, they raised and bred the expensive thoroughbred Egyptian, Persians, and Siamese cats, and approximately 100 of the kitty offspring were sold a year for $35 to $50 a piece. And the money bought wheelchairs, crutches, and artificial limbs for black disabled people. Princess's work earned her the support of Dean Martin, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee, Pearl Bailey, Nat King Cole, and Dinah Washington. Cats are adorable to me, but I'm allergic. Like, for real, I'm not one of those people who just says that. Like, for real, after an hour, I start to lose it. But they're so cute. Growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, black people have always been more partial to dogs. Like, I would go over people's houses once every blue moon, I would see a cat in somebody's house. And by the days of the Great Depression, black people were increasingly owning dogs, like when the New York Amsterdam News noted that poor residents were still finding a way to feed their pets. It's likely that these animals were a blend of companionship and security measures. Especially in rural areas and in the South, attack dogs were valuable tools of survival. However, when poor families moved from slums into state housing, they had to leave pets behind or hide them. When it comes to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, dogs are a key feature of pictures and video from that era. Canine units had existed since 1870s England and 1910s Paris, but canine units became institutionalized into American police forces after 1954's Brown versus Board of Education. There were at least 24 such units by 1960. German Shepherds were the dogs of choice, and when Jackson, Mississippi police used them against black co-eds protesting a segregated public library, a local reporter pointed out that the dogs had been trained by a former Nazi stormtrooper who trained Dobermans to guard Hitler's airports. This 1963 photo of 15-year-old Walter Gasden being attacked in Birmingham, Alabama, is one of the most infamous. In addition to footage of police spraying down nonviolent protesters, this image damaged American PR internationally, remarked Baltimore's Afro-American newspaper, "Beham's police dogs shock world." Baltimore had a growing reputation for its aggressive K-9 unit, and their program had inspired the one in Birmingham, Alabama. Reported the U.S. Information Agency after studying worldwide coverage, pictures of police brutality, particularly the use of police dogs, has militated strongly against the U.S. image. Not only were American race optics changing, but the pet industry was reaching new heights too. In 1966, Ebony reported that the owner of Complete K-9 Service in Harlem, a man named William Robinson, made $40,000 a year running a kind of finishing school for upper crust canines, which grew from a dog walking business. Clearly, people were spending more money on their pets. In 1977 Chicago, a 24-year-old Vietnam veteran named Foster Corder was profiled for starting a booming pet photography business after noticing that shooting pretty women wasn't paying enough. He proudly noted that one family ordered 500 pictures of their dog for Christmas cards. And by 1983, there were over 40 million dogs in America, and approximately 28% of black adults owned at least one of them. And Ebony mentioned that a rising crime rate corresponded with an increased desire for guard dogs like German Shepherds, Dobermans, Akitas, and Rottweilers, but also pit bulls, and we'll be back to them in a second. So fast forward to 2005. Many black pet owners during Hurricane Katrina refused to leave their pets behind when being rescued, as FEMA had no policy in place for evacuating people's pets.
We can't take the dog. Well, this guy and his dog rescued me off my roof. He's had the dog for 14 years. He's only 24, so he's had the dog for 14 years.
You know what? I'm not doing this for the camera. We don't give a shit about that. We have a solution for you, okay? I want to take the dog on what's his name?
Rafiki.
Sorry?
Rafiki.
Rafiki. We're gonna take him and two other dogs that we met here, and we're gonna send him to a house in Baton Rouge. It's a private house where we're sleeping, and when you get back,
we get the Baton Rouge.
Even still, when Michael Vick was exposed for dog fighting and euthanizing poorly performing dogs in 2007, many black people felt compelled to distance themselves from the notion that black people abuse dogs. It didn't help matters that numerous black athletes defended Vick's actions and complained when he was sentenced to 23 months in prison along with 3 friends. Vick also had the support of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP. The support of Vick, which bewildered me at the time, was in response to the racism permeating the entire scandal, like when Tucker Carlson called for Vick to be executed over this, something the conservative talk show host never did for killer cops or killer dogs. The Michael Vick controversy exposed for many that white people tend to care more about dogs and other animals than black people. After all, Vick's crimes, which absolutely heinous, and I don't stand by that shit at all, so please don't get it twisted, earned him more prison time than the killers of Mike Brown, Oscar Grant, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, and countless other victims of racist violence. Okay, but despite Michael Vick, black people love their dogs. Like, black people love pets. In the 2000s and through the late 2010s, poor black people in rentals and welfare housing were often denied pet ownership for one or a multitude of reasons. A 2022 paper by Kelsey Goldman examined pet inequality, mentioning that landlords charge exorbitant pet fees from $200 to $700 plus monthly fees, which leads to black people having less pets or hiding them. Some landlords outright deny pets. In case you're thinking about landlords protecting their assets, Goldman reported that although 85% of landlords experience damages related to animals, the data suggests there is no statistically significant differences between tenants with and without pets. Data also reveals something interesting about pet breeds. So pit bulls are a wide variation of dogs that are often mislabeled. They likely came to America with English and Irish immigrants and were utilitarian guard dogs that eventually became a symbol of Americana. Not only were pit bulls used in a bunch of early advertising in the first half of the century, and and featured in The Little Rascals as the mascot Petey, but Theodore Roosevelt and Helen Keller both own them. Their popularity waned after World War II, and their reputations changed in the 1980s during the war on drugs, when most guard dogs at trap houses were pit bulls. Though in modern times pit bulls are often associated with black people and believed to be the most dangerous dog breed, often banned from residential areas and named explicitly in legislation, studies in Spain and Great Britain found that the breeds most responsible for bites, both before and after the breed bans, were those breeds not covered by it, primarily German Shepherds and mixed breeds. In Prince George's County, Maryland, a 2003 study that observed the effects of a dog breed ban found that while the county spent $250,000 a year to round up and kill banned dogs, including pit bulls, the public safety had not improved. Research has found that breed is less important to dog attacks than the fact that 97% of dogs who attacked were not spayed or neutered, 84% were abused or neglected or unsecured, and 78% were not pets but guard dogs, breeding dogs, or yard dogs. So what does this say? People need to train their damn dogs, even the tiny little ones. People need to get their dogs spayed and neutered, and people need to keep their animals secure. Oh my God. Dana M. Campbell found that dog attacks by pit bulls are more likely to be reported in the media, which has been evident since the 80s. Lastly, similar to the fact that there's a long-held myth that black people feel less pain and have super strength, there's a myth that pit bulls have special locking jaws that once they've sunk their teeth into flesh, they can't be dislodged without either thrusting a rod between their teeth or killing them, which is false. And most animal shelters automatically euthanize pit bulls regardless of temperament or age. So one final thing on black pet ownership. The view on dogs continues to be compounded by modern policing. The use of dogs to attack black people has not ended, long after the civil rights movement. A year-long study by the Marshall Project found that in Indianapolis, Indiana, where someone was bitten by a canine unit animal every 5 days, over half of the people bitten were black and over 65% were bitten despite not acting violently. In Talladega, Alabama in 2015, a 25-year veteran of the police force testified that the police department wanted a dog that would bite a nigger before it sought out a Belgian Malinois named Andor, who would go on to bite 8 black people in just 1 year. Because police departments across the country don't keep strict records of dog-related injuries on civilians, it's impossible to know how much policing and racist dogs make people, especially black people, fearful of dogs, like in the old days of enslavement. Pet ownership matters to me because it has important benefits for everyone, abled and disabled, rich and poor, young and old. My babies held me down during the pandemic. They keep me responsible and happy. They make it impossible for me to go without multiple daily walks, which is good for my circulatory system and mood, and they comfort me when I'm feeling emotional. They also, as I have pointed out in numerous videos, ghostwrite all my content. They're like really smart. I be putting them to work in that office. Like they be typing, they be getting to work. Helping them research this video really made me understand why I still meet older black people who fear dogs or who don't like them. And it's sad to know how many times dogs have been weaponized against us in history. But to see adorable videos of modern black people loving on their pets makes me really happy, and this is why I follow so many dog pages on my socials. What kind of pet do you have? Do you keep bunnies like Red Fox, who allowed them to run wild in the front yard of his Las Vegas home? Are you more of a big cat aficionado like George Foreman? By the way, his baby tiger chased a photographer during a shoot. Do you have a pet boa constrictor like Janet Jackson, who slept in a bed next to her in the 80s? Do you have a pet pig the way my Nana did in the 1950s? Do you have a bunch of doggies like Meg the Stallion? Shout out to all the black cat owners. Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this brief history of a black people's history of pets. I hope it gave you something to think about, or maybe you just want to go hug your baby tighter. Go do that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you like and subscribe. And thank you to Drift for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out the Drift link in my description box below. Remember, my code is intellectual.